So, Joe, thanks for joining us. Joe
My
is
pleasure.
our paid media strategist at Flaunt. So I think so far on these episodes we've had someone from every other team, and now it's Paid's.
Yeah, I think I'm the first one, aren't I?
Paid's turn,
Paid's
repping.
turn, representing.
If you have, and you should have, listened to any of the previous episodes I've done when I've been speaking to some other of our colleagues, I normally start by saying it'd be really interesting to chat through career to date, things that you've done, etc. And I normally say I don't want it to sound like an interview, and let's not go through your CV. But you've been on a really interesting path, I think, to get to what you're doing today in the paid team. So I'm going to put it to you. I've got your LinkedIn in front of me, so I've got your CV in front of me. Tell me why you want the job. How far back do you want to go? Where do you want to start? Because I'm interested to see what I'm looking at here. Maybe your first 2-3 roles have social media in the job title. Now, I know job title don't mean everything.
Yeah.
But that's quite interesting, like where you've gone to from there, and now where you're at and what you're doing. So, over to you, really. Where do you want to start, and what did your first role entail that might have any similarities to what you do now, or the complete opposite? It's got absolutely nothing to do with what you do now.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a weird one. I obviously started doing like an apprenticeship. I was, I think, don't quote me, but I think one of the first people in the country to do the social media apprenticeship.
Really?
I think it was one of the newer ones at the time. So I did two. I did I think it was called social media. It is on there, so you might have to remind what it's called.
So Skyline apprenticeship work placement social media analyst.
Yeah.
And it looks like you did that for about a year.
Yeah, so on the certificates, if you go down a little bit, it will tell you what the exact apprenticeships were called. And I think one was called social media, it was like social media marketing, I believe.
Somewhere.
And then there was an ICT and principles and development one as well.
Yeah.
So Skyline was a company that was set up by effectively just like I don't know what you call them now, but like an apprenticeship training company. So that was they had obviously all the apprentices that they trained. I was one of them. And then they had a company that they had to the side of that was obviously, was a way to kind of give the apprentices a bit of an opportunity to, have some kind of real life
put it into practice
work experience. Yeah. The idea behind Skyline was that it was like your first stepping stone. So we had obviously, we had clients, they weren't on a big scale by any stretch of the imagination, but we had clients, we worked with them, we dealt with clients kind of on a day-to-day basis, and then we did the work, and then eventually the idea was that you get put into a bigger company or a bigger role as another placement. The idea behind apprenticeship there is obviously to then eventually get you a job. That's the ultimate kind of goal. And obviously I never went to university, like a lot of people kind of have.
Yeah, that's good. That's almost a point of discussion as well, which we've talked about previously.
Yeah.
When you were talking me through that apprenticeship stuff there, the one question I was ringing around my head, and then you've kind of covered off the uni thing, smashing those two bits of information together. How do you reflect back on? Do you have any regrets from I didn't go to a university perspective, or do you look back really fondly and value the apprenticeship experience that you got? Like what are your thoughts on all of that? Your kind of education.
Yeah, I mean, so you've probably seen on there as well that I DJ'd for nearly 10 years. So when I was kind of in my last couple of years of school, so second year of sixth form, I was actually DJing and getting paid and kind of, was thinking, oh God, this could be like, I could be the next Carl Cox kind of thing. Nice. So that was obviously, I was very passionate about that, very passionate about music, very passionate about kind of everything to do with that. And actually the reason I did an apprenticeship was to kind of honestly keep me busy. Whilst I was DJing. I didn't want to just have, the kind of one job, DJ on the night and have nothing to do through the day. I was young. I could do that back then.
Yeah.
So looking back on it, I mean, I wouldn't change a thing. I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, like you've seen on there, I've got quite a few different placements. So I've got quite a few different kind of very varied bits of experience in, some pretty big agencies, some smaller agencies. Obviously, because my apprenticeship was social media, a lot of the roles were based around social media, and that was a little bit different to obviously what we do here, where it was more like organic management. There wasn't as much paid involved in it. So yeah, it was, I think it's a debate that is still going on, isn't it? Do you go to uni? Do you not go to uni? And there's all the fees that you have to pay to go, and people still end up paying that. And I'm not at any point discrediting go to university, and it definitely worked. Both my little brothers have gone, and they absolutely love it, and they've come out with really, really good jobs. But for me and what I wanted to do, I didn't necessarily feel it was, I had to do it.
Yeah.
And obviously, I didn't, and here we are today. So it obviously works quite well. But the experience you get when when you're young. I mean, I was 16, 17 when I was doing that. So being able to get into those big agencies and get in and get that experience is so valuable, I think, at that kind of time.
I like speaking from experience, and again, we've covered this off in other chats, so I won't milk it. But I went to uni. The summary from where I am now, looking back, is I probably wouldn't rant and rave about it too much. I wouldn't recommend it. And to be honest, it's quite interesting when you said like 16, 17-year-old. If I try and put myself back there, pre-uni, and then having gone to uni, the one thing I probably, and you haven't even said this, but as we're chatting, the one thing I think is, I know how much I was shitting, and I'm sure everyone is shitting themselves the first day in the real world, but the head start that you must have had, and you haven't told me this, but the head start I assume you had compared to me going then to uni, doing 3-4 years that I did, and then joining the workforce, if you will, in whatever age I would have been then, 21, whatever it is, and absolutely bricking it. As I say, that's not to discredit suddenly you're an apprentice and you're absolutely comfortable. But I'm probably envious of people like you who got into the workforce, the proper workforce, as I'm going to, work in your career really earlier than I did, because you were probably well equipped with just I don't know, etiquette of how you handle.
A good way of putting it. I think etiquette's I'm not shy of, speaking to people. I think it's probably one of my better qualities is being able to just speak to anyone. So me going into a workplace where at that age where I didn't know anybody didn't really faze me. It probably would have fazed other people. But yeah, just, I guess it's just weird things like, knowing how to behave in an office and how, from a younger age, knowing what you kind of do and what you don't do. And that's only something that you get with experience in that environment. You don't get that at university. I mean, maybe you do. I don't know. I never went to university, but I don't feel like that's something that you get there. It's very, you do this, you do that. I mean, I've got loads of friends who have gone to university, studied a degree. They've got a really good degree. They're doing something completely different now. So it's one of those. It
kind of fills a gap for a lot of people. When you don't have the right answer. But the apprenticeship route, I think, is really, really interesting. Generally speaking, I know obviously we're both older now, looking back at our kind of education as such, but generally speaking, would you recommend it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
going that route.
The one thing that puts people off with apprenticeships, I think, is the wage. Obviously, the wage for an apprenticeship is typically quite low. For me, that didn't really have much of an impact on me because I had the DJ, and I was DJing pretty much full time at that point. But the experience that I got from that and the people that I met, I still talk to Annabelle, who was the owner of Skyline and VQ, where I did my apprenticeship. She checks in every time, it's like whenever she sees someone on LinkedIn, like, oh, how are you doing?
That's lovely.
And it's really nice that. And she's, I owe a lot to both her and Andrew for, getting me into those roles and getting me in that position to kind of feel comfortable. And then obviously, worked my way up to the point that we're at now. So yeah, I mean, I would absolutely recommend it, but I think it's different for everyone, isn't it? So
I think it's good to hear you as the apprentice, and I think for anyone who might be listening from a business,
I'm sure she'd very much like to like to hear that. So I won't make her head too much bigger.
It's good to hear you having been on that side of it as the apprentice, from the education kind of being on the receiving end of it, and then thinking about any businesses that might be listening in and thinking about the apprenticeship scheme and being whether they should be supportive of that or not. I think hearing that and knowing the space that we're in, I think there's been, through my career in digital, there's been a total void, and I think it's getting closer. That void is getting closer and closer in terms of digital marketing, apprenticeships. You don't have to go to uni. All of that seems a little bit more joined up, a little bit more accessible, and there's case studies like you're talking through
exactly.
there. So it must have set you on the right path then for where you've got to now. You told me, obviously, off air, that you kind of you've got to where you are now via also having a bit of a dabble in SEO as well.
Yeah, that was a bit of a weird one.
SEO.
No, well, yeah, I mean, I can obviously very much appreciate, like we work with the SEO guys here, and the work that they do is phenomenal. But I think it takes a specific kind of person to, I don't want to use the word enjoy, but I personally didn't really enjoy doing SEO because so my first proper role was a junior SEO role at my old place, and it was great. I did enjoy it, but it's one of those where sometimes it can take 6 months to a year to see results and see things that you've done actually come to fruition.
Yeah.
And for me, that the difference between that and paid was, you can make changes in paid and see it almost instantly, and the ability to have that control a little bit more at your fingertips quickly appealed to me a bit more, and that's just me. I'm not saying for any reason that might be different for somebody else. But yeah, so I then kind of, in my previous role, you'll see from my CV that you've got in your hand, that my role changed quite drastically there. I started off in SEO. I then ended up doing kind of SEO paid and email. I did a bit of everything.
Oh, right.
So email marketing is something that we don't really do an awful lot of here. It's something that, obviously is very, very big. And I did a lot of that. I did a lot of, really big email campaigns for some really big brands back where I used to work, and then transitioned to effectively not doing any SEO and just did paid and email.
Yeah.
And then, moved from there to here, and,
lost the email.
Yeah, lost the email and just stuck with paid. So
would it, again, you're obviously the expert in your field, but thinking about when we're bringing on or we're having a conversation with a prospective paid client, we want to get to grips with all marketing activity that they're doing, regardless, outside of paid, because it can either be complementary or you need to know about it because it should be complementary to what you in your day-to-day and the team that you're part of are doing on behalf of our clients. From an email perspective, though, you rightly said Flown don't kind of offer that as a service. Obviously, if we've got a client who's struggling with email, we've got the experience to be able to answer questions, etc., maybe point them in the right direction. But I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's actually some serious value in you having sat in an email marketing role from an experience perspective, or being exposed to that when you're thinking about paid anyway, as I mentioned there, to have that kind of cross-channel complementary mindset. And I think that then bleeds over into how we, as a paid proposition at our agency at Flown, approach paid strategy. It's multi-channel, because ultimately that's how we as consumers shop.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, everything's multi-channel now.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. I think email is really clever, and it's actually very interesting to sit there and learn how these email campaigns are put together, because it's all done based on, similar to how we would build audiences in paid. It's done through kind of cookies and how people have kind of behaved on your website. And we'd build email flows that would start from day one. They'd last, a month, for example, and they'd go through somebody who, I'm trying to picture one in my head now, but it can be really complicated in terms of if user A has done this, they get this email. If user A hasn't done this, you wait 4 days before you do this.
Yeah.
And you probably, if you're listening to this and you're getting fed up of all those emails that come through your email inbox. I don't do that anymore, but it can be annoying, so you have to do it in the right way. But you're right, having paid, SEO, social, email, if everything kind of comes together and is done properly, as a kind of a whole kind of marketing kind of experience, then it can work really well. And email can be, is one of those that is very, very good if done properly.
Yeah.
There's some good examples off the top of my head, but I don't know if I can mention those examples, but Huel, for example, they do really, really good email marketing. I mean, I looked at getting some Huel stuff last week, and their emails that they sent you are very, very, very clever, and they make you want to open them. And and then that comes down to things like UX and graphic design, and it kind of all, you can't have that really enticing email subject line and then a poor email within it. So it all merges together, and it's another one of those things that everyone should really be
100%. I think the roundedness of your experience to then be more niche or specialist now with what you focus on can only put you in better stead than you just being dropped into paid career and then just going with it. I think agency helps that, doesn't it? Because we're exposed to
exactly
the different teams, plus then the apprenticeship path that you've gone on and all the bits of exposure that you've had.
Top-offs,
as must have made you you're probably tuned in without even maybe realising into, for example, paid prospecting campaign with retargeting via email follow-up. You've sat across where you sit in the paid team. You've done email, so you understand how they can play off each other.
I mean, I think the experience I got in having that, having that kind of path of apprenticeship, then the placements, you'll see that, the placements there were like 3 to 6 months. They were quite different, the agency, so having that kind of ability to sit there and take it all in. When you come into, let's say you finish uni and you then get a graduate job at somewhere like Flaunt, it can be very daunting, I imagine. I imagine you come in here, it's a nice big office, there's lots of people here, it's busy, it's bustling, there's loads of work going on. If you've never had that exposure to that kind of environment before, then I can imagine that's quite terrifying.
Absolutely.
And maybe, me as a person, I don't particularly get fazed by a lot of things, so that might come into play, that everyone's slightly different. But I think something that sticks with me that I got told when I was having my apprentice was that you can teach anybody anything, but you can't teach somebody to have like a good personality. So if you've got the right attitude and the right kind of work ethic in terms of you want to get to A, there's nothing stopping you getting there as long as you've got the kind of the drive and the ability to want to get there.
There's definitely a baseline, and I think your characteristics and your general approach and desire can seriously give you a very good head start. That concludes the interview. No, sorry if it did feel like an interview, but I want to go back to it to finally to one very, very interesting thing that you've touched on, but we haven't really milked it too much, and I want you to milk it a little bit more about the DJ stuff. My first question really is, my first kind of more important question is, are you still doing it? And if
no, I'm not. I'm retired.
You've retired.
The headphones have been hung up,
Why is that, or is that just didn't fit into where you are in your life and career?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I think the phrase I would use was "burnt the candle at both ends" for quite a few years. I DJ'd from kind of 16 to 24, 25. I was doing a full, so this is when I'd kind of completed all my apprenticeships. I was kind of in a full-time role. I was doing your standard kind of 9 to 5 and then doing Friday, Saturday, DJing until 6, 7 in the morning. So you think you do that on a Sunday and you're getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Before you know it, you look at your watch and you're like, oh, I need to get to bed. I've got work in the morning. And when you're, obviously I'm not old, but when I was a bit younger than I am now, I could do that quite comfortably. And, I'd be able to get home from work on a Friday and just stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning, get to work number 2, and DJ 3 till 6, and then get home, sleep, do the same thing again on Saturday. I just couldn't. It was like, work-life balance, I guess, that kind of having a bit more free time on the weekends was much more valuable to me than continuing to DJ. I mean, I do miss it. Like, I miss my social life for 6 or 7 years was that. And obviously the music was a big part of it, and I still very much, I'd still think about how things would sound in if I'm listening to a new song or anything like that. But, I got to experience some really good, some really nice big clubs. I played at some really big festivals. I had a whale of a time for nearly 7 or 8 years.
So if you've hung up your headphones, would there be anyone or anything that you'd get them back on for? And that's my final question.
Yeah, funnily enough, I actually had this conversation with my girlfriend literally two or 3 days ago. The one thing, I mean, I played Leeds Fest. I'd do that again in a heartbeat because that was unbelievable. We did V Fest. Me and a load of the guys who all kind of worked together in Leeds. Mint Club as well. I'd definitely do that again. And then the kind of one that I kind of worked at for the longest amount of time, which is actually now shut, would be Moco in Harrogate. That was kind of my home for nearly 6 or 7 years, and I think if they did it, for one night only, I'd be back. Back in a heartbeat, yeah. But I'd have to probably have a nap beforehand, which I wouldn't have had to do before. So,
good man. Thank you.